And we're back. Welcome, everyone, to our latest Reedsy Live, Reedsy's ongoing series of webinars where we bring on professionals from the world of publishing to talk to you about writing and publishing better books. Long-time viewers may notice that things are a little bit different. I'm now joined by someone else here. If you've seen more than a few of these, you may recognize my co-host today from one of our previous webinars where she was a guest. But now she returns as a co-host. Please, everyone, welcome editor Jody Fodor. Jody, how are you?
Hello. Good to see you again, Martin.
Yeah, really love to see you. We sort of met when you first came here to London about half a year ago, and we had a chat and met up in a pub, had a good night, and yeah, you've been hopefully a regular fixture here on Reedsy Live. How are you now?
Colleagues ever since.
Yeah,
I'm very well. I miss the UK though, always.
I'll tell you, it's a bit cold. It's a little bit warmer there in LA where you are right now.
Yeah, it's very sunny and lovely out right now, but that's what we pay extra for.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the pay a premium for that. Anyway, today
We
we're
do,
going
we
to
do.
have a wonderful panel discussion on ghostwriting. Jody helped put this one together. She found a couple of fantastic ghostwriters who are going to come and talk to us about what it takes to be a ghostwriter. This mysterious art. You hear about them all the time, but are they sworn to secrecy? Is it an omerta type situation? Jody, like you're I think personal contacts with our two guests. How did you first meet them?
I met Tony Rubino, one of our ghostwriters, through a mutual friend who is an agent, a literary agent. And I met Sandra because I just wanted to find some new editor friends. And I stalked her online. And, just like when we were little in the sandbox and we say, do you want to be my friend? I said that to Sandra online. And we clicked right away. So
it's pretty much the only way people these days make friends. You have to like stalk
yeah.
them on social for a while with your fake account, and then you
Oh no.
real account.
I flat out just told her who I am, and they both. It's just been great because editing and writing, those are solitary activities. So however you can build a kind of a network and a community that's very welcome in my world. And this turned out to be both of them. They've really made it wonderful for me. So I was happy to wrangle them for this.
Nice. It's something that even though I've been working sort of publishing adjacent for a few years, it's still a bit of a grey area for me. I'm not entirely familiar with what the process is, and so I'm very much looking forward to this. And let's see who is here today. We have Harry from the UK, Clinton from Maryland. Gail says greetings from California. Bonnie from Maryland. We have Mike from Ohio. Let's make these a little bit bigger. Daisy and Zoe from Delaware. And Deanna from Washington, wine country. Oh, okay, really? Or maybe Washington. Oh, I did not know that.
No, yeah.
Was
There's a wine country in Washington. Yep. Washington State.
Wymanette from Bogota, fantastic. Chesapeake, Virginia, fantastic. So many great folks. Elara here from Oxford in the UK. Yeah, it should be a good one. Those of you, if you're new to this, do make sure you give this video a like. It helps us get this more seen. And I'm pretty sure it works towards my bonus at the end of the year, so it can't hurt. But I'm really glad to see so many folks from out there. I'm not sure exactly where you are, particularly in your particular journeys, but hopefully you can learn a lot about this often secretive corner of the publishing world. Jody, I've just noticed it is now 8 o'clock where I am. It's probably midday where you are. How do we think about getting this thing started?
Let's bring on the ghostwriters.
Okay, I'm going to disappear. You might hear my voice every now and again. Oh, by the way, hi, I'm Martin, as you see here. I'll be sort of keeping an eye on the comments and sort of answering anything as we go. Don't worry about taking notes. You'll be able to replay this video as soon as this is done. And within a few days, we'll get a transcript done of this. So if you don't like taking notes, don't worry about that. All right, Jody, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. So glad you're here. This is going to be sort of I think a conversation between the three of us, although I have lots of good questions here and I'll lead with those. But in a more formal way, I would like to introduce these two ghostwriters, beginning with from the Colorado mountains, Tony Rubino, and I'm talking about bears, walking up her driveway. Tony Rubino is a leading collaborator and concept developer for nonfiction books and novels. Her credits include New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today bestsellers. Tony is inspired to work on books that have the power to create positive change. She and her partner, Doug Wagner, also offer a customized writing course that walks first-time authors through the process of creating marketable books from concept through publication. So, Tony, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. It's going to be awesome.
And how's Colorado?
Colorado is cold. It's snowing right now, and I keep opening and closing my curtains, so I'll be appearing and disappearing, I guess, as a real ghost would do.
Well, please promise that if a bear does walk up your driveway, you will turn the camera around.
It's a deal.
Also
Absolutely.
joining us is Sandra Kane, who will bring on a lovely English accent to balance the American and English sounds you'll be hearing. Sandra is a former academic who designed and taught several postgraduate degrees in creative writing at universities in the UK. She is now a best-selling ghostwriter specializing in memoir and nonfiction titles, including business. Her passion is to seek out remarkable stories that inspire and transform individuals and communities. Welcome, Sandra Kane.
Hey, nice to see you.
And now, Sandra, you have a UK life and a California life, isn't that right?
I do indeed. I spend 6 months of the year in Hampshire in the UK, and then I spend 6 months of the year here in Los Angeles. So what a wonderful life.
That sounds like my fantasy life. So I guess we should just jump right in because this crowd wants to hear what on earth ghostwriting is all about. So I think we'll start with the very simple question: what does a ghostwriter do? And who would like to begin fielding that one? Sandra, why don't you start?
Okay. So what does a ghostwriter actually do? They spend a lot of time in the background writing books for other people. So they have to listen to what the client, or we like to call the client the author, wants for their book, whether that's nonfiction or fiction, and write the book in the style and the voice of the author, while at the same time staying in the background. So we don't have our names written on the front of books. We often have an acknowledgement in the inside flap of the books, but otherwise we stay in the background, and we're very happy to do that.
What do you think, Tony? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love what Sandra said. Absolutely right. And capturing the voice and the style is so important, especially in nonfiction. I think, the other thing is that people don't realize that the vast majority of nonfiction books that are published by traditional publishers have been written with a professional collaborator. I think that number might actually be more than 80%. So, if you're reading a book and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how did this celebrity write such a great book? Or I wonder why this doctor is a great writer. They're probably not. They team up with experts like us who can really help their message and their story to sing. And we get great gratitude and appreciation, and it's just a super inspiring way to work to help other people to get their messages out to the world. Makes my day every day.
Mm-hmm. Are there varying levels of credit that you get? To some people, are they just happy to gush to the world that you pretty much wrote this thing, and others who keep it really secret?
That's very interesting. Some authors like to keep it completely secret. In fact, I had one that didn't even tell his own wife that his book was entirely ghosted, which is a little disingenuous, really. But many, and in fact, I insist on this, it's part of my contract, many actually give a very nice sort of, what should we say, a testimonial or a reference in the front cover of their book saying thank you. They'll often call you an editor rather than a ghost. It's very rarely that they cough up and say that this was a ghost-written book. However, as a ghost, you can sometimes arrange to have your name on the front cover. So it might be so-and-so, Joe blogs with Sandra Kane, or Joe blogs and Sandra Kane. So that's something that you work out yourself with your client.
Is that when there's an and or a with? I always think, and I'm probably wrong here, but I always think, ooh, they really rewrote it, as opposed to kind of. Is that it was just something that author was willing to negotiate? Is that all it is, or does it ever reflect a different level of involvement from the ghost?
No, it does reflect a different. Well, it's kind of both, really. So if you say Joe blogs with Sandra Kane or Tony Rubino or whoever it happens to be, it usually means that you're hidden more in the background. Although your name is out there, you're not considered an equal partner in the writing process. But if it's Joe blogs and Sandra Kane, you're considered an equal partner in the whole writing and designing process. And often that's reflected in the fee, or if you go on a royalty, if you decide to be paid by royalties rather than an upfront fee.
Mm-hmm. Tony, we were talking earlier, Sandra and I were talking earlier about deep ghosting. And I was asking about this idea that sometimes you're not allowed to even say the author. And what I've heard about that is that it can pay more, but you can't leverage it for future work because you can't talk about the book. You can't say sometimes that you even know that celebrity or whatever. Do you know much about this side of things?
Yeah, I've done a few deep ghost jobs. The first few novels that I did were as a deep ghost. There's a lot of pros and cons. Like Sandra, I did a nonfiction book with somebody who also did not tell their wife that I was their writer. And they didn't tell me that they didn't tell their wife. And we were standing in a room together, and he basically said, "Oh, I'm happy for you to meet my researcher." And I was just like, "Oh, well, good to know that's who I'm supposed to be today," because I wasn't told that ahead of time. So yeah, it's different degrees, but I no longer will do a deep ghost job, and there's personal reasons for that. But one of the biggest reasons is, the writers, the authors who I work with that are super cool people tend to be very secure. They'll brag about me to their friends. They're not trying to pretend that they wrote their own nonfiction book. They're saying, "This is my fabulous writer, and you need to hire her next," and all these things. And so they're very proud that they have the wisdom to work with a professional so that they can get a really strong, high quality book. On the fiction side, it was a great way for me to break in, and I was willing to do it, and it was good money. But yeah, it did set me back a little bit as far as clout goes, not being able to show anybody anything from those books. And the other thing that's sort of weird about ghostwriting fiction is that if you have friends and family who read your emails or your letters or anything, they're not going to believe that you just sat down every night and wrote this amazing novel. I mean, it really is better to be honest and say, "I'm a visionary. I mean, the people I work with have amazing stories. They, sometimes the story's been stalking them for years or decades. And they have no interest in, spending 20 years learning how to do a great job writing it. They just want the story to get out there. And I'm happy to do that. I think that's super fun."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the fun word. It is fun. It is huge fun being a ghostwriter, I have to say. And you meet so many different people.
Right. I wonder if people are more possessive about fiction and keeping that secret. It seems to me that seems, if someone has done the ghostwriting of your fiction book, do you really feel like an author, as opposed to being someone who had an idea based on your own business and you want that as a book to go along with your industry and maybe as a thought leader or self-help or whatever? Is there a difference, do you find, in people's willingness to be upfront about it?
Yeah, there is, but I do a lot of educating people, helping them to understand, what's going to happen when the book comes out. If they want to get it published by a traditional publisher, it's going to be in their best interest to say that they worked with me or whoever the ghost was, because it shows, that they have somebody working with them that knows how to do this. But, I think that things are changing. Back in the day, even nonfiction authors were pretty secretive about working with ghosts. But I think we're in such a collaborative world now. And, what other industries do you not hire an expert when you're going to embark on something you've never done? I don't know why people think they have to write their own books. It's
Very true.
like you didn't build your own house, you didn't make your own car. You hire experts for all those things. You're not going to do surgery on yourself
Nope.
or your friend. I hope. So my best clients are the ones that have fabulous ideas and they really want to make a positive difference in the world, fiction or nonfiction. And they're happy to give me an acknowledgement and tell their friends that they're getting help for their book.
We have a question here from Layla, who asks, do traditional publishers need to be told you have a ghostwriter if you're selling them a memoir?
Have to be told. I don't think they have to be told, but I think they would certainly appreciate being told. And as Tony said, I think it shows that the author has sort of done their groundwork and is more serious about the memoir that they want to write. The very fact that they've been looking at hiring a professional. So I think it would be very embarrassing if a traditional publisher picked up your memoir and you kind of made out that you'd written the whole thing. I think that would be very difficult. And I wouldn't recommend
Good. Okay. Well, so I think we've talked about the different definitions of certain kinds of editing versus ghostwriting. So maybe we should try to define some of that. So how does someone, do you do editing as well? Or help me understand, does ghostwriting involve a blank page? Or does it start with notes? Or does it start with a manuscript? Or is it all of the above? And how does it compare to developmental editing? How does it compare to book doctoring? Help us understand what's what in this world of terminology. Either of you, who would like to field that one?
Well, I think it can be all of those things that you said, Jodie. It can start with a blank piece of paper. It can start with an idea. It can start with a rough draft. It can start with an outline. All of those things, and that is the job of the ghostwriter, to help that author through that process. It may be that you're given a manuscript, a first draft of a manuscript, and the author knows it's a first draft and they want you to do a deep edit as well as a ghost. So there is that sense of it could be a deep edit, could be a structural development, could be a full ghost, or it could be all of those things together. So
when you say it could be a full ghost, what are you talking about when it starts with a manuscript?
So in my experience, a full ghostwriting job is a client will come to me with an idea. So let's say, it's very different. Let's say it's a memoir. Okay, so they'll come to me and say, look, I really want to write my story. I don't know where to start. And they come with the idea. And as a ghostwriter, it's your job to guide them through that process, to talk to them, to see if there is a story, in fact, to be told. If there's no sense of jeopardy, if there's no obstacles in the way, there's no story. So you have to make sure that the client understands storytelling principles and the fact that there has to be an element of drama and conflict within this memoir to make it readable. So it's a lot of educating before you even start writing, or before you even start thinking about where you're going to go. There's a lot of educating that has to be done up front. So from the blank sheet of paper, there's a whole process of getting from the blank sheet of paper to 276 odd pages, say, or 300 odd pages of written material. It's a long process, and which is why it can take, anything between 6 months to a year to ghost a full ghost from the beginning. Tony, what do you think? What are your ideas on that?
Same as you. People come with projects at all different stages. But usually I end up doing what I call concept development with a client, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, because they might have a great idea, but they might not know how to really create a hook for that idea or to create a story structure for that idea. With my nonfiction clients, they usually, are experts in a particular field. We know what the topic is. And then it's a matter of figuring out, well, what hole on the bookshelf can this author fill, especially if they want to be traditionally published? So usually the first two questions I ask people is, what do you want the book to do for your readers? And then what do you want the book to do for you personally and professionally? You know, what are your goals? Are you going to feel like this was a failure if you don't get a traditional publishing contract? Or is this a book that you want to sell in the back of the room? You're a professional speaker, or a book you want to have available in your office? You know, depending on the goals will depend on how I approach the process. And we have a proven process that we use for ghostwriting that we've been using for decades, but we customize the process for every client based on their communication styles, how they like to work with us. Normally, though, it does start with a concept. For fiction, I learned something interesting about myself this summer. I've been ghostwriting novels for a while now, and I've always had a lot of creative flexibility. And this summer, I had a referral that was a very detailed outline for a sort of a mystical fantasy novel. And I loved the outline. I thought, wow, this is a book I would really love to read. But I found that as I was reading the very detailed outline for this novel, that I stopped breathing. I felt really constricted. And I realized that this book was not going to allow me the type of creativity, the ability to use my imagination, which is just as important to me in fiction as the writing itself. So my partner, Doug Wagner, who's also on Reedsy, is the one who is now writing that book. And he loves working with fiction authors like that. But for me, the ideal fiction client is somebody who says, hey, this is a message or something I want to get out to the world. Help me figure out a story and the characters and everything else that's really going to make this story fly and, you know, get my points across and all of those things. And, but every project is different, like Sandra said. And I worship at her literary altar, because people who write memoir is the hardest thing of all. You know, you just have the facts. You have to work with only what really happened. Whereas with a novel, if I need a conflict, I can make one up. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Actually, this is quite interesting, talking about just developing what you said there, Tony, talking about how difficult it is to write memoir. Is that I have had experiences where the story sounds great, and I've been with a client and they've given me an outline of their memoir, and I work it up and we develop it, and then I give them the first draft, and they'll say, oh, yes, that did happen, but you can't put that in because it's going to upset my mum. Oh, you can't put that in because it's going to upset my husband. Or you can't put that in, it's going to upset so-and-so. There's no story. So you've taken out all the jeopardy and all the stuff that the author thinks will upset people they know, and you're left with a memoir that is just a list of, I did this, and I did this, and then I did this. You know, there's no sense of jeopardy. So
no, that's a data dump. That's your that's putting a cover page on your journals, and nope, that does not sell.
I think certainly if you want a ghost to develop your memoir, or to ghost write your memoir, as the author, you have to be prepared to be completely open about your life and what you are prepared to have in that book. And the whole relationship between a ghost and a memoir writer is quite sensitive, because as the ghost, you are hearing all of their personal details, their personal life. And it's a pretty asymmetrical relationship, because they don't hear so much about your own life. And that can be difficult at points to negotiate. And I think the ghost will often have to say to the author of a memoir, hey, you know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor, you know. Because sometimes you can be thought of as somebody that's going to fix your problems for you if you're an author of memoir, and that's not what should happen.
Well, if you've taken some of their life story and put it in the manuscript, can it be assumed that they're the ones who gave you that information? Were they not?
Yeah. Yes, but then.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I'm saying, yeah, I would assume that they want it in there. That's why they told you.
Yes, but when they see it in there, that's a different matter. Yeah, when they see it written on the page and they think, oh, you know, oh my goodness, mum's going to read this, or whatever, whoever's going to read this. Oh, maybe I better take it out. And they're often taking out the best stuff. I mean, this doesn't always happen, but it has happened a couple of times. It's something.
And what do you do about that? How do you advise them?
Well, you have to be really honest and say, we need to keep this stuff in here, otherwise you've got no story. Without conflict, there's no drama. But we can tone down the conflict if you want. There are ways of toning it down at the same time as keeping the excitement, as keeping the memoir a page turner.
Right. And you can change, can and should and will change names. And it's funny how often people won't recognize themselves, although they're pretty accurately described. But the name is different, and that's one level of protection. But that is such a sensitive genre. It's perhaps the most sensitive of all. And
it is. And I think it's part of the ghost job to explain to the client, to the author, that they probably need to have it looked over by a libel lawyer as well. I think that's an important thing to communicate.
Mm-hmm. So who needs a ghostwriter? Who's doing most of the is it a lot of business people? Is it more people who admit I just have a great idea and I don't really have the time or the interest or the skills, or how does it balance? Who needs a ghostwriter? Maybe talk about some of your specific clients without naming them. Give us some scenarios. Tony.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf of all the books that I've ghostwritten. So a lot of people can benefit by a ghostwriter. If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're in a profession where you're actively working, every day, you don't have time to write a good book. So there's that. But really, it's just if you are super inspired to get a particular message or, a thought leadership book, or teach somebody something in a prescriptive book, and you really want that book to have an impact, then unless you've been writing your entire life yourself, you're going to do well to hire a professional to guide the process and, help you along the way to different degrees. We're different degrees of hands-on for different projects. But the idea that a nonfiction writer has to go it alone, especially in today's world, is really just a myth. And as I said earlier, most of the books traditionally published in nonfiction, there is a professional collaborator involved, whether they're named or not. A lot of my credits are co-author credits. So, and I don't ask for my name to be on the cover of people's books normally, because my name isn't going to help their book to sell. If I get a co-author credit, I'll have it on the title page a lot of times. But yeah, I'll let Sandra chime in and see what she thinks about that.
Okay, so sorry, Jodie, can you repeat the question?
I was just asking who needs a ghostwriter? I mean, who uses ghostwriters? Who's best served by one?
Right. So, well, ditto Tony, really. But I have found that recently I've had a lot of memoirs coming my way, which I really do enjoy writing, because I'm very nosy about people. I'm curious. I'm very interested in people's lives. I find other people fascinating. And I think two of the best projects I've worked on recently have been both from activists, actually. One was a well-known personality, a social media influencer. She was a sex activist. And the other is a book I'm currently working on at the moment from an undercover activist. I can't say much more than that at this point, but they were very excited. I was thrilled to hear these stories, and I was thrilled to be able to write them and to be able to write in these different voices. One was a female, one is a male. So, that's very exciting. The other thing, I get a lot of business books from entrepreneurs. Business people wanting to use books as a calling card, really, for when they're doing their presentations or their conferences or their talks, and they've got something to validate their business behind them. I've done white papers. I've ghosted white papers. I've ghosted blogs, all sorts of different things, really. The only thing I don't do is fiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was going to chime in a little bit to help people understand what some of the differences are in the kind of people that you might hire to help you with your manuscript. And honestly, I've been doing this quite a while, and I talk to people like Tony and Sandra all the time about the terminology, and I'm not even sure we know how to divide it. But so I don't put myself out as a ghostwriter on Reedsy. I say that I do assessments, developmental editing, and copy editing. And those overlap quite a bit. And they also sometimes lean into ghostwriting. I tend to get work, I work on manuscripts that already exist. Sometimes the writer wants to know, what do I have here? Can you assess it for me? Can you read this manuscript and do a write-up to let me know the strengths and the weaknesses and where you think it can go from here? Sometimes we jump right into developmental editing, which is I describe as kind of a conversation between the editor and the writer. So that tends to take place in the margins. Sometimes I have so many comments and questions that I'll actually put them right in the manuscript so that the person knows exactly which segment or sentence I'm talking about. And it's just, I'll say things like, I think maybe we should have heard about this in an earlier chapter, or, well, this is terrific dialogue. I'd love to see more of this. I want to hear this person talk. I feel like there's more telling than showing where we could really see the scene here. Or can you expound on that? That kind of conversation goes on throughout the whole manuscript in a developmental edit. Copy editing or line editing, I'm not sure I'd make a distinction, although a lot of people do. For me, that's working at the sentence level, beautifying the sentences themselves. And that usually happens when a manuscript has already gone through developmental editing, and maybe it's gone through more than one developmental editing pass. So then you're really working to add sentence variety and beautify them at the sentence level. But what I've been doing recently, I call hybrid editing, and that is a combination of developmental and copy editing in one pass. I used to just call that editing. Publishers or agents would come to me and say, I've got this manuscript, I have an author, they have a book deal. So the publishers are interested, but the manuscript isn't ready. Do your thing. So they're not saying do a developmental edit or do a copy edit. They're just saying it needs to be elevated. So I would do what I call hybrid editing, and that you can do when a manuscript is at a certain level. It's not really rudimentary. It doesn't need massive developmental changes. You can do what I call hybrid edit. So the conversation that I described as a developmental edit is going on, but at the same time, line edits are going on. So the author gets this document back that has track changes showing changed sentences, but also the comments saying, what if you add this? What if you do more of this? And then it goes on that way. So those are some of the distinctions. And I guess I'm still not sure what we're calling book doctoring, Tony. But that's another term in our business that I think, I don't know, does it step into all of those, or I don't know.
Yes,
I mean,
well, sort of. So I know book doctoring is a little bit of an antiquated term, although I just did see it again a few weeks ago. I think that the reason what this conversation is saying to me is that it's a really good reason why you need to have really clear contracts or letters of agreement so that everybody knows exactly what your job is. This is exactly what I'm going to be doing for you. This is what you agree to do as a partner in the process. Having all of that worked out ahead of time so that there's no gray area is super important. When I was hired as a book doctor, what would happen is somebody would have a book contract with a traditional publisher. They would attempt to write the manuscript themselves, or maybe work with a writer that wasn't as good as they needed to be. And then they turn the manuscript into the publisher, and the publisher does not accept the manuscript. So then the author either has to return the advance if they got one, or fix the problem very quickly. So then I would be given a manuscript that was kind of a mess and would have maybe 6 weeks to 2 months to whip it into shape. And I used to love that because I felt like a hero. I could swoop in and do my magic, but now not so much. I'm just sort of over fixing other people's messes. I would rather start from the beginning and do it right. But I do want to say that as much as I advocate for people hiring experts to help them with their books, there's a really good reason, I think, for everybody to try to write at least one book in their life, because it's such a fascinating journey and we learn so much about the topic and so much about ourselves. And if you can talk, you can write, maybe not great writing, but you can get your thoughts down onto the page. And then, a book doctor or somebody like Jody, who's a high end or hybrid editor, can help you to take it across the finish line. So there's all kinds of reasons to hire and not to hire a ghostwriter. And that's why you always want to be talking to a potential writer about what your goals are, so they can help to make sure that they're going to help you to reach them.
I think a lot. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
I'll say one thing that we haven't really mentioned as far as a deep dive ghostwriting is concerned is the amount of research that you would be expected to do as a ghostwriter. And I'm very interested to hear what Tony has to say and think about this as well. So often when I get a blank sheet of paper, I have an idea, an author will say to me, okay, I want to write this, blah, blah, blah. I haven't got time to give you information. I'll send you some information, but it's not much. But can you do some research on this, this, and this? And that's hard work, especially if you don't really understand the topic yourself. That takes time and energy. And it's something that we ghosts do. What do you think on that, Tony?
Yeah, oh man, such a good point. So the book Age Later by Nir Barzilai, I co-authored that book, so I'm allowed to talk about it. And I get hired to write science books because I don't have a science background. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but they want the book to be understandable to the mass market. So they want somebody who knows what questions to ask and how to come up with analogies and all these things. But in writing the book Age Later, even though Nir was wonderful and super available to me all the time, I didn't even always understand his sentences. Like, I would have a sentence that had 8 different words in it that I had to look up. And then I'd have to look up some more words for those words. And there were paragraphs that would take an hour to write. I'm not kidding. So it is really hard work. Not only the research itself, but being that sort of step down transformer where you're like, how do I take this really intelligent idea and make it accessible to somebody who may not even have a college degree?
And that word accessibility, that's a really important word, I think, because if you do have somebody like a scientist or a doctor and they come with all this stuff, and all that, they have their own knowledge which they want to impart to you, forgetting that there's going to be a reader, an ordinary reader, not another doctor on the other end. So yeah, you have to be able to write in a simple way with brevity that ultimately has accessibility to the intended readership. That's important.
I have a question here, sorry, from one of our viewers that's probably best answered by Sandra. When ghostwriting a memoir, what's the sort of percentage of background research versus in-person interviews with your client or your author?
I get to know the author very well first. Okay, so I like to be able to see them in person if I can. That's not always possible. Sometimes it'll just all be done over Zoom. But I usually do get to know the author in person, and usually I'll interview the person maybe 3 or 4 hours a week, and then we work on that on a weekly basis. Research with memoir, there's not so much research because you're writing somebody else's memories. However, saying that, I did write a book about somebody that ran marathons in 3 of the world's most dangerous countries, Iraq, Somalia, and Afghanistan. So I had to do the research, finding out what these places looked like. Because they would say, oh, it was sandy and it was hot, but you have to develop that a little bit more, which meant buying guidebooks, reading the guidebooks, looking at the photographs, pretending that I'm actually there, trying to understand what it feels like to be hot and sweaty and running and male and have a backpack on my back. You really are. So you have to do research to understand the environment that the author is living in. And again, if they suffer from PTSD, for example, or depression, you have to do some research to find out what that feels like. So yes, you are taking what the author may tell you, but you have to research further to really understand the world that author is living in. So when I wrote the book for the sex activist, well, that was huge fun, as you can imagine.
Well, that leads me to a question that I think a lot of people want answered about voice and how you honor to stay true to a voice that is not yours. How do you do that, ghostwriters? Tony, what do
Who
you
you
do?
want to talk to? Okay, I'll answer. Voice is something really tricky, and not all ghostwriters can do the chameleon voice thing. I have a really pretty good ear for listening to people's voices and being able to tell what words they use, certain intonations, different things like that. But even with that ability, I usually won't nail the voice on the first chapter. It usually takes a little bit of back and forth. So, Jody, if I were ghostwriting for you, we would be doing interviews. I would be trying to capture your voice. I would then be asking you to read what I write out loud and Jodyize it, which means if I have written any words or sentences that would not come out of your own mouth, change them. And, within a couple chapters, I'll really get it. But writing fiction is what has really helped me to capture nonfiction authors' voices, because writing fiction, we're writing all the different characters and their personalities, and readers have to have a sense of who's talking without saying Sam said, Joe said, whatever every single time. So my fiction has helped strengthen my nonfiction, and my nonfiction, because of the structure, has helped to strengthen the fiction. And I love both.
I like to think of writing in somebody else's voice as rather like being an actor who uses method acting. So they live that life as much as they possibly can. And I think this harks back to the former question about research. I will try and understand the person's voice first by being with them and spending time with them and listening to those little tics or things that they may say. And second, by kind of pretending I am that person for a short while in the privacy of my own home. But I always share the first chapter before I go any further with the author to check that I have their voice. Because if I've got it totally wrong, I need to be told. And I'm quite good at that. I think it's because I enjoy people. I like people, as I said. I'm curious about people, and that all helps. And also, I think you have to be pretty much an empath if you're going to ghost people's books. You have to have an understanding of the psychology of people, and of course, you cannot be judgmental.
I like the actor thing. I like the method actor idea.
Method writer.
Yeah, that's a helpful.
I think Jody, I think of it too as when you hear comedians that can do other people's voices. I just think that's amazing. Somebody, and I know Jody, you can do some impressions, and accents. When people can do that, I'm so impressed. And then they are also impressed when other people can do that on the page. But the listening, the deep listening that Sandra talked about is so important. And the other thing that's important is understanding that a lot of people don't really know how they sound. People don't know their own voices. It's a little bit like when you hear the sound of your own voice on an audio recording or on a video and you think, oh, do I sound like that? People, even if you capture their voice exactly, will often not think it sounds like them. And then you say, well, ask your wife to read it or ask your best friend to read it. And they'll say, oh, yeah, that sounds exactly like you. Now, if the author still doesn't love the way that voice sounds, we can change their voice however they want it to be changed. But if they're in the public eye, it makes the most sense for the voice in the book to match the voice that comes out of their mouth when they're on TV or wherever they are.
Yeah.
Right. I think that people are also interested in hearing about expense and how that ties into process. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I'll start by just saying a little bit about how it works with me as an editor versus being a ghost. And, early on, I found it was really helpful to do an assessment and then talk about where we might go from here. So when you come to me with a manuscript, so I'm not necessarily ghosting it, although again, some of the work gets so deep that it is somewhat like ghostwriting. I don't do this huge or necessarily a large project estimate. And even though I know that's appealing to a writer, to say, how much is this going to cost me ultimately? I don't feel comfortable making estimates like that. There are too many variables relative to the author's ability, the time they can put in, just what needs to be done and how the process is going to work between the two of us. So what I like to do is say, this is approximately how long I think it'll take me to developmentally edit this manuscript or hybrid edit it or XYZ it. And why don't we say, let's go with 10 hours of working together and see how we do. And I've had books that I've worked on from start to finish, almost complete rewrites where we just did it 10 or 20 hours at a time. And at any point, the person could jump off the bus. And they haven't, but I think we both like the idea that we're able to leave if we want to, or keep going if we want to. I try to give as much of a down the road estimate as I can, and I know that that's a big part of ghostwriting projects generally. So I'm really interested in hearing what both of you have to say about how you determine scope, how you help determine expense, whether or not that's shocking to people, if it varies, if it changes mid-project, etc. So whoever would like to start telling us about how that works on your side of things.
Tony?
Okay. It's easier if you call on us, then we don't have to stare at the screen. So, all right. There are so many variables. You know, people say to me, how much is it going to cost to write a book? It's like, well, how much is it going to cost to make a music video? You know, what do you want?
Yes.
Do you want bells and whistles? Or they're, you know, what are we talking about? And am I doing all the research? Or are you doing the research? All these different things. But in general, my fiction rates are about $1 a word for a novel. So if it's a young adult novel, you're looking at something in the neighborhood of 55 to 60,000. If it's an adult novel, you're looking at something closer to 75 or 80,000. If it's a nonfiction book, because that's where all my bestsellers are, then my rate is usually between about $1.50 and $2 a word. So in that case, for a full-length book, you're looking at, you know, something usually over 100,000. But there can be creative financing deals that are made. You know, it's never just about money for me. It's really, you know, do I love this author? Do I really want to help them get their message out to the world? Is this somebody I want to spend a whole lot of time with for the next 9 months to a year? Because it's a very intimate process. You know, so all of those factors play in, you know, not just the money itself.
Yes, and I would agree there with Tony. I think most of us are negotiable with the fees that we charge. However, I think it's really important that potential authors understand that you can be working on this project for 6 months to a year. So therefore, you're going to be charging, you know, quite a lot of money. It is hard work. And again, like Tony, I will reduce fees for a project that I'm really excited about and that I really, really, really want to do. But yeah, those are ballpark figures that Tony just said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing
I'm
I'd
wondering.
like to sort of bring.
Sorry, go ahead, Martin.
So yeah, one of the things I like to bring up in general that is worth bearing in mind. First of all, a bunch of people have been asking, where can you find ghostwriters? And I'm here to tell you, Reedsy is a fantastic place. Tony and Sandra are two of over 140 ghostwriters we have at Reedsy. A lot of them will hang their own shingle out, but if you're looking for a convenient place, just go to Reedsy, see who's available. And the important thing that they're saying, that sort of stands for whether you're looking for an editor or a cover designer, if you can excite the professional, whether they're an editor or a ghostwriter, on your project, you can actually get them to charge less, basically. Because I know a lot of folks who will basically respond to something and go, I don't know, this person sounds like a bit of a hassle, or I'm not really excited about this project. I'll artificially jack up my quote. But if you can go about and actually excite them, and if you're someone that they want to work with, then that's one of the best things you could do to basically start streamlining your budget. Anyway, that's my digression.
Also, it's not going to excite the potential ghostwriter. You're going to excite any potential publisher. So yeah, excite your ghostwriters.
Right.
One question we've had a few times on the message board here. For private clients, so not ones you might get through a publisher, is it super rare to get a royalty split type deal? Like, I know a lot of folks may not be wanting to put the money up front, and they may be wanting to see whether like you'd be interested in going 50-50 on the royalties. Is this a thing that happens?
I was going to say, I don't know a lot of editors who will take that deal, because as we all know, it's very hard to make money on a book. And I've definitely had writers who sounded very excited about the idea of working together until we started to talk about the money. And then I remember one guy in particular said, well, what if we just do it together and split all the profits, including the movie deal? And I thought, wow, one is getting ahead of oneself there. In other words, there was no money. I was going to make zilch unless it's sold. And I'd love to hear what you two see in that, but I don't really know people who take that deal. It's our livelihood, and we would like to know how much we're going to make in a year.
It's a massive risk to do that. However, saying that, I am now working with a client that I absolutely adore working with, and we're working on a 50-50 royalty split, no upfront fee. And I'm prepared to take that risk because I absolutely know that this is a winner. And, we've already, we're in the process, I should say, of selling the serialization rights to a major international newspaper. And the client himself already has a deal in Hollywood. So I'm going the 50-50 split on royalties.
Oh, I can see it. I can see the energy, the excitement. When you feel that much, it's in your gut, right? You can feel this one. You're in.
Yeah, I just even when he first approached me, I just knew this was an incredible story and it had to be told. And I still believe that to this day. And that's the manuscript's out there, and we're on the way to getting it published.
Excellent.
But that's the only time I've done it. I've never done it before. It's too much of a risk.
Tony, have you done it? Would you do it? Do people do it?
Well, first, let me tell you that almost no books ever sell enough copies to make royalty. Even international bestsellers don't always make enough to pay royalties, because in those cases, a lot of times the author has been given such a giant advance that it takes forever for the book to earn that advance back. So
I think people need to stop for the tears right now, Tony. Let people cry for a minute.
Yeah, sorry.
It's very bad news for a lot of listeners.
Well, the thing is, authors have to be entrepreneurs today. And I hear that word tossed around, nonfiction authors and fiction authors. Marketing is a huge part of this profession, letting people know that your book exists. So, I probably wouldn't do a 50-50 deal unless my writer's intuition was really keen about something, like what Sandra just said. Sometimes I know that I know. And if I run into a situation like that, I would be open to it. But then there would still be the question of, who's going to pay my mortgage for the 6 months and buy me food while I'm working on your book? It's a full-time job. I've been doing this for 30 years. So I don't really have the luxury of just hoping that a book will make money. The people who hire me are very sincere about wanting the best book they can have, and they're willing to invest in that. And they're also willing to invest in the marketing and everything that goes into making sure that that book makes its way to bookshelves and into readers' hands.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to that, right? That's a process. That's an enormous percentage of the process that I think a lot of, when we have our writer fantasies, they don't involve the hustle and getting your own publicist and getting your own website together and whatever. We just want to sip tea and at the hang out in New York or at the round table and say brilliant things and let the publisher run around and give us book tours and whatever. And those things, that's not how it works. You really do have to be part of that, which is, again, why so many people have trouble getting traditional book deals if they don't already have a big platform that's going to help a publisher sell them because they've already sold themselves. So that's another bit of a wake-up call. So I wonder, how does that factor into when you take a client on? Do you consider their platform? Do you consider how many followers they have, or how much of a budget they're going to commit to promotion, and how, or is it a mix? Standard, what do you consider platform when you take on a client? Oh, you frozen?
Oh yeah, the last bit of your question, Jody, was a bit on the garbled side.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I see our little connection seems to be a little bit fuzzy there. Are we still
I think
muddy?
you're just about able to hear you.
Okay. Well, if it's not coming through, maybe we should take some of your questions, Martin. I don't know if we're taking too much Wi-Fi here.
Yeah, let's do that. A bit of a spoiler. Was it Jody and Sandra are in the same location, so if one of their internet is terrible, it's going to affect the other one. But do send in your questions right now. We're going to have a bit of a Q&A. Hopefully we'll hoover up any of the topics that we haven't covered. Let me disappear here for a second and pull some of the ones from before. Let's see. Okay, Deborah asks, how does someone become a ghostwriter? How do you market yourself with that experience? She's completed her own memoir, which she's in the process of publishing. Let's start because she's talking about Memoir, Sandra.
Yeah, so how does someone become a ghostwriter? Right, okay. Well, if you want to be represented by Reedsy, you have to have had at least 5 books published anyway. So that's a bit of a tricky one. And hence why it's all professional within Reedsy. I think if you have never had any experience as a ghostwriter before, then start local. Go to your local big companies that are in your neck of the woods, where you live, your locality. Ask them, perhaps, would they consider having a history of their company ghosted. Look for local stories in your local paper. If you feel that there's a really good story there, contact those people. And again, ask them if they would like something ghosted.
Tony, any
I can
thoughts?
see I'm breaking up.
And no, we've got that.
Yeah, I'll second that. Starting with your own local network is definitely the way to go. I teach this topic at workshops sometimes, and in Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents, this is an older version, but I have a chapter in the back of this book that details how to start a ghostwriting business, and says some of what Sandra said and then some other tips. But really, it's always start with the people you know. Who are your professionals? Does your dentist want to write a book? Do you have a doctor that wants to write a book? There's so many people want to write a book. They just don't know that they can. And sometimes if all you have to do is say to them, I think you're fascinating and I would love to write your book. And of course that needs to be true. But if it is true and you say that, you'll be surprised by some of the response you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've got a question here from Connie. What kind of issues need to be addressed in the copyright agreement? Maybe we'll broaden this out to a bit more about the things that you need to agree upon in terms of, I guess, people I think have been mentioning being worried about who has the copyright to all this. Tony, whether you want to address this one first?
Yeah, so the copyright is with the publisher unless you self-publish and then you keep your copyright. And some hybrids, most of the hybrids let the author keep the copyright. I don't do those types of contracts, but my ghostwriting contract, I think, is either 9 to 11 pages, and addresses everything, every possible variable, including death. So, it's very specific so that there's no gray area, and that's what you want. You want to make sure there's no gray area.
Yeah, I would ditto Tony on that one. Copyright, it always is retained by the author, and I say that in my contract.
Whoops, sorry, I got the wrong one in here. I've got a question here that sort of came up earlier from Benati. This is something we get no matter whether we're talking with editors or ghostwriters. This idea about ideas being taken, like how being stolen by ghostwriters or editors. Is this something you're familiar with in any way? This, Sandra?
No, I've never heard of this. I think it would be a really, really bad idea if that happened. Then the ghostwriter is extremely unprofessional and should never work in ghostwriting again. That's what I think. I've never heard of this. I mean, I'm wondering if it's a myth. I don't know, but I do know it's a worry for some people.
Yeah, right. I watched recently a webinar with Brooke Warner and someone from Gotham Ghostwriters and Jane Friedman. And they were saying the very same thing, that it seems like it's a big fear out there, but it just never happens. And they were talking about how few people even ever need to sign NDAs because nobody's going to steal your idea and run with it. It just, no one seemed to have even heard of it ever. I mean, this person asking this question says they've heard of it, but I don't know if that's a urban myth or if they have specifics. But what about you, Tony?
I mean, I'm sure there are probably some unscrupulous people on the planet who might do something like that. But the thing about fiction is, it's important to have a really great idea, but it comes down to how well you execute the story. So, if you say somebody stole your story idea, I could probably find 12 novels that have your story idea that are all written in different ways. So it's a little bit, I don't know. I've never heard of it happening personally. And honestly, publishing is such a small industry that if a ghost does something sketchy, they'll just never work again. I mean, it gets around so fast.
Yep, I would think so.
I got a question here from Susan. How many ghostwriting projects do you take on at one time? Do you juggle 2 or more, Tony?
2 at the most. I like to have a nonfiction book and a novel at the same time. I won't do 2 novels or 2 nonfiction books at the same time. So it just gets crazy making. But yeah, 1 novel, 1 nonfiction book, and I'm very discerning about the authors that I choose to work with at this point in my career because, I only have so many years left on the planet, and I want to make sure that what I'm writing is really making a positive difference. That's the most important thing for me.
Yes, and I just do 1 project at a time. There is some overlap sometimes when one project is ending and another is beginning, but I like to deep dive and I like to just really concentrate on 1 project at a time, especially if it's a memoir. The last thing you want to do is get your characters muddled up, your clients muddled up. So for me, 1 at a time, mostly.
Right. With me, Martin, it's Sandra and I were just talking about this earlier. I actually have a whiteboard with a grid because I have a lot of authors that I work with at once, and the projects are in varying stages. So I might have done an assessment or a developmental edit, and off they've gone to work on something, and then I'm doing copy edits with this person, and maybe just a few chapters, but maybe a full manuscript, maybe an assessment. So I do have a lot of projects coming in and out at the same time, and patient authors who are understanding about how something just overlapped and whatever. And so it's I don't know, compartmentalizing the brain, I guess. But I do like my dry erase board with the grid. And it helps me keep track of who's doing what and when it's due and what they expect from me next and what's happening. And so but yeah, so I kind of like that. I like the variety. I like to work on a memoir today and a young adult novel, later the next day, and maybe it's some nonfiction. So I really do like working across all genres. But you do have to stop and go, the project that we're working on today is this one, and remind yourself of where you left it and what that voice is and what those goals are. So if you like that sort of thing, then the editing side that's less ghostwriting, immersion based, it might be more for you.
We've got another question here about money. Patricia asks, are you paid up front when you complete the book, or do you split it? Sandra?
Yeah, I split it. Usually I It's usually a 50% upfront, and then the rest is monthly after that. Sometimes I do 50% upfront because that's where all the work is, of course. All the planning and all the structuring, all the research is upfront. 50% upfront, and then it might be the next tranche might be when I deliver first. It's the first bit of the manuscript, first draft. That's the word I was looking for. First draft, and then the final bit will come in at final polish. So there's lots of different milestones, and again, it's negotiable. So you can be paid monthly if that's what the client prefers. There are all sorts of ways to do this.
Tony, I guess you are you fairly flexible as well with this?
It depends. If the book is with a traditional publisher, then my payments are sometimes aligned with payments that the author is receiving. But usually if it's traditional, I'll get a third up front, about a third, after the first draft is finished, and then a third when the publisher accepts the manuscript. But something that publishers are doing now that is not nice is they're trying to make ghostwriters wait until the book is actually published to get the last third. And that can be a year later. So that's not cool. And I won't sign that contract. And so I go back and forth on that issue with publishers. When somebody's planning to hybrid publish or they're self-publishing, we usually do maybe 20 or 30% upfront, and then the other payments are attached to milestones, completing chapters, having the author be pleased, moving on. So, but super flexible about how all those things can be worked out.
Ooh, I've got another great question here. That sort of applies to all of you, I suppose. Let's start with Jody. Christopher asks, how do you manage expectations in the beginning stages? Say, for example, you work on a book that has the aspirations of, landing a book deal. If it doesn't land an agent, what's the best way to avoid disappointing your client, Jody?
Yeah, well, I do like to ask people, are you hoping to traditionally publish? Are you considering all of the avenues? Or are you starting with the traditional dream? And then, and I don't do as much of this as the ghostwriters probably, because it seems that a lot of people I work with don't really know, and they know they want to publish, but they don't really have their hearts set on traditional or hybrid or self-publishing. And I don't work on proposals anymore. I will work on a book proposal that's been drafted, and I will help revise that. But for people who want to traditionally publish, you probably know that you need a very well polished book proposal, and those are things that I think Sandra and Tony both work on. So they might want to weigh in on that. But I generally worry less about the publishing side of things, and I work in the developmental and the creative and the polishing of the manuscript to make it as good as it can be. And then I let them know that I'm not really going to be much of an advisor. I mean, I know more than the average guy on the street about the way the publishing business works, but I'm not selling myself as a consultant in getting through the publishing process as in a way that the other two, I think, might be doing.
Yeah, I always make sure the client knows up front that there are no guarantees ever towards publication, and they have to accept that, and that's the risk that they have to take. It's a financial risk, as well as a risk of confidentiality. Not confidentiality, confidence. They have to have confidence in the fact that this is something they really want to pursue, and that there are no guarantees.
Yeah. So I've been told that when I'm talking to a new client, I sound like I'm trying to talk them out of working with me, because I cannot sleep at night if I think that somebody has unrealistic expectations. I just can't. They have to understand how challenging it is to get published. With nonfiction, I won't agree to even write the proposal unless I know that this person has a really good chance of getting a contract. I won't accept the money to write a proposal otherwise. With fiction, very few novels get published compared to how many are written. So my clients know that up front. Some of the novels I've ghosted have been traditionally published, but a lot of my clients really want to go the hybrid route because they're using the book to raise, do fundraising, or they're philanthropists and they want to give away a bunch of the books because it's meant to inspire a particular population or something like that. But, clarity again up front, being absolutely honest with them that you can't promise them anything. Even if you're the best ghostwriter in the world, you can't promise them anything. Mm-hmm. With publication, you can promise them all kinds of things with good quality. Yeah, clear about that. Yeah.
I've just one question. I realize we've run a little bit over. But based on this question from Old Parchment, who is apparently a Victorian ghost, I'll sort of rephrase it. They ask, is it possible to be both a writer and a ghostwriter at the same time? But I'll sort of rephrase it as, is the sort of work you're doing right now, does it sort of scratch the itch that you may have, in terms of creativity and the work you're doing? Or is there something you still feel is, you'd like to get a book out there with your own name on it and be the author of that? Tony?
Yeah, I'm actually working on my own book. I'm like the shoemaker whose kids doesn't have shoes, because I get paid really well to write other people's books. So a lot of times I'm not putting as much time into my own. But I am working on a young adult historical fantasy that I'm very excited about and should have finished by the end of the year. But one of the things too is it's honestly as much fun for me to work on other people's books as it is to work on my own book. Because it isn't about me owning the idea. It's about like, how can we explain this or write this story, or, what can we do to bring like the most excitement to whatever it is we're writing about. And so those of us who are ghostwriters, we love to write. I mean, I also love to imagine and create, but I'm just delighted that I get to get up every day and make a living writing. Like, how great is that? I feel fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was a writer under my own name. I still am a writer under my own name. And being an academic, of course, a previous academic, we would have to publish under our own name, certainly if we were going to teach other people how to write books. So I've had about 10 books published under my own name, including textbooks on how to write. And yeah, I have other books that I'm working on myself right now. But at the moment, I am preferring to write books for other people. But to answer the question, yes, you can be a writer and a ghostwriter at the same time.
Jodie, do you have a book brewing in the background?
Oh, it's brewing. It's always brewing. I hope it's comforting to all our fellow writers out there that even if you are a professional at this, you still have the resistance, you have the delays, all those blocks, imposter syndrome. Oh my God, this is brilliant. Oh my God, that's terrible. It gets in my way as much as it does anyone else. But yes, I have, I worked so much in memoir that it has occurred to me over the last few years, it probably wouldn't kill me to write one. And then I also have an idea for fiction that I have been toying with, and very much, wandering and writing my thoughts, narrating them into notes and outlining and putting little blips of dialogue. So that the fiction piece is very, it's in its beginning stages. But yes, I would. I have a book on the market that's academic. I used to do a lot of tutoring. I was a college English teacher for a while, and I've tutored and taught in workshops for many years. So, and I came out with something called SAT Word Slam that teaches vocabulary using rhyme and humor and snarky mnemonics. And so my name went on that one. But as far as the more traditional prose, I have not. I'm like the other two. I really do get a huge kick out of writing. Full stop. And so as an editor of any kind, you are writing. You're writing every day. And I get a kick out of writing in different genres. I'm a business person today. I'm a memoirist tomorrow. I'm writing, teenage dialogue on another day. And it's a great exercise for flexing terrific creative muscles that I suppose will only help my own piece later.
All right. And on that point, I think we can start drawing this to a close. The obligatory plug for Reedsy, of course, if you are an author or someone looking to work with a ghostwriter, we have over 140 on Reedsy, including Sandra and Tony. So sign up for a free Reedsy account and start searching for them. by genre, by whatever you sort of care for. You can look at the sort of things they've worked on that they'll explicitly tell you about. But yeah, just pitch them your project, and they'll tell you how much how much they'll charge for it. There's no obligation. There's no need to sort of feel bad if it's way out of your budget. You tried, you figured it out. But let's just go around the horn and see what sort of projects you're kind of looking to work on at this point. Tony, is there any sort of any type of book or project that you're really yearning to work on at this point?
I really love writing the hero's journey. Coming of age stories and also adult heroes' journeys is super inspiring to me. I'm interested in writing a parable, which I haven't actually done yet, but I think that would be really fun. And again, if you have an idea with a fiction book, if there's something you really want to teach, especially young people who aren't going to read a nonfiction book about the subject, sometimes the way to do it is to embed a novel with those messages, with that kind of information. And that's actually what the kind of book that I just finished, which was wonderful and fabulous to write, and the clients were amazing. So I'm open to a lot of different things. What I'm not open to is anything that's going to give me nightmares. I don't do any horror or blood or gore or like bad, scary endings. No. Anything other than that, or memoir. I don't do memoir. It's Sandra's game, but I'm willing to consider anything else.
Sandra?
Yeah, well, I do memoir. I'm always looking for really inspiring stories, but I also do business books and books from entrepreneurs. Anything with a really strong, exciting message, I think, that has an element of transformation or personal change, personal development, inspiration, something like that. So I'm open to all.
Jodie, any types of books you're looking to deep edit?
I really like to work in memoir, and I work in a lot of memoir. And the more memoir I work in, the more memoir comes my way. So, and it has not gotten old. So, but I also love to work with humor and witty, snarky. It's kind of my nature to be a wise ass. So, if an author lets me, or maybe that's their natural voice and they don't know how to write that way, or maybe they've got a little of it and we really want to amplify it. I'm working on a piece right now with these three sisters who started a business together, and they're very funny, and they're all about fun and bringing fun to everything they do and doing it with a martini, and they're letting me write with a lot of humor, and so that's big fun. I'd love to get more of that, but I'm open to fiction and nonfiction, and I think if people think I might be a fit, they should just reach out and we'll have a look and see if we are a match.
All right, amazing. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us today, Jodie, Tony, Sandra. This has been amazing. Everyone who's watching, wherever you are, we're going to have a transcript for a good chunk of this that will be available on the Reedsy website in a few days. If you've signed up on Eventbrite, I'll send you a notice about that. At the end of this month, I'm having another webinar about outlining. To outline or not to outline, with authors Caroline Levitt and Gina Sorrell. Gina, I believe, she's her third time doing a presentation for us. Her new novel is out next month. There's even going to be a giveaway. So do tune in for that one. Sign up for it. Again, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Jodie. Really appreciate it. I'd love to have you on again in some capacity. But yeah, well, everyone at home, really appreciate you joining us. Bye.